And this is it. So named because it ran from the old town centre of Turku, where we are, down to the convent along the riverfront. Turku was the first city in Finland, over to the southwest. And in fact, if you ask the Finns today, they say that is the true Finland. As you can see, it's now surrounded by a building. In fact, they were putting up this building when they discovered these ruins. The building is a modern art museum. And those are what's left of the merchant houses that used to be next to the river here. These are the cellars. And they burnt down in 1827, which was the Great Fire of Turku. 1,000 homes were destroyed during that fire, because of course most of them were made out of wood. The cellars were then just filled in and built on top of. There's an awful lot more besides this. The most remarkable thing about this museum is that all of it was underground. 2 streets completely buried either side of the old convent road. This side, they were still occupying these buildings up until the 18th century. And there's some lovely cellars in here, which they think might have been remains of the convent itself, although other people dispute that and say there's not enough evidence to back it up. They're going off a couple of skeletons they found in here. Anyway, round this side, through this lovely old doorway. Remember, all of this was underground. They've got some computers, because it's very much a hands-on museum. No, I'll leave it alone. And through here, this was the street, and this old section, they didn't even know existed. This is the really old stuff, which shows that this town was an important town long before they imagined it was. And that, on the old maps, was marked as a square and a cabbage patch. Now, where's this friend of yours? All right, well, come on then, let's go and meet him. So where's this Hagar the Horrible then, eh? It's a woman. He couldn't make it, so he sent his sister Helga. Hey. Is she going to be showing us around then? Right. Where are we going first? You can tell she's from your family, can't you, eh? What did she say? A castle. Right. Castle, which was built in 1280, and it was a military stronghold. Then it became the king's palace, and basically it was to show the Finns that the Swedes meant business and to keep the Russians out. And this is it. Isn't it terrific? Look at that. The castle enjoyed its greatest period during the Renaissance, when this whole place would have been full of life. The King of Sweden came up here all the time because he loved the beer of this region, which was the easternmost part of his Swedish empire. Do you know how much the men of this castle drank per day? 5 litres. I do not drink 5 litres a day. It's about 10 pints. And the women drank more than that. Something to do with the food being salty. They had a completely different social structure, you know, because whilst the men were at a banquet, they all danced together, just the men. They didn't do the vogue. They'd be dancing away together, and the women would be in another quarter, getting a few ales down the neck. Gustav II was sitting here, the beginning of the 1600s, just about to get stuck into his pickled herrings, when a big fire burnt the whole place down. They've had some fires in this region, and I'm afraid that was the end of the castle's greatness. One other thing to tell you about. Tomta. Little troll-like people. What? You can see one. Oh, well, come on, let's go and introduce ourselves. Usually it's only children that see tomtas, but you're shaking hands with one. Right. Now what sort of height is this particular tomta? It's that height. Right. It's a bit different, isn't it, to She Who Must Be Obeyed. Taken a little detour off the King's Road to Kuusisto, which is where the bishops who really ran Sweden, or Finland in those days, lived. I'll be with you in a minute. There's a little school outing going on. Either that or we've overrun with tomtas. Anyway, the bishops did run the country, and to show their power, they built this castle in 1317. And they stayed here until, in the middle of the 1500s, the King of Sweden pulled it down, stone by stone, because he wanted the church's money. And you know, strangely, overnight, they changed to his religion. Spooky or what? Yeah, so it's time to get moving. Have you seen any? They're here, you know. I can almost sense them around. They're not up a tree. They're elks. They live on the ground. God. What do they look like? You wouldn't miss it. They're huge, black, and they're in the forest. It's a bunker, not an elk. It's a war... 1940. We can't go in. It's locked. Helga's had it opened. Helga. She's back on the scene, is she? She would, wouldn't she? She'd have some sort of contact with one of these. She probably built it with her own bare hands. She probably mixed the concrete in her mouth. She probably lives in one. Actually, and you're going to have to adjust yourself because it's dark down here. It was built by the Finns after the Winter War with Russia, which was 39-40. And basically Russia laid claim to parts of Finland, and Finland said, no, get lost. The Russians did come. Yeah, it does actually work. It's still in perfect working order. This is a cannon. And the Russians did come. They took the peninsula, the end of the peninsula in the southwest of Finland, which is where we are now. And then, where their sort of boundaries finished, the Finnish built bunkers like this all the way round. They wanted to build 40-odd of them, but actually they only built 26, I think. That's the terrain directly in front of this machine gun. So you just fired along the terrain, and anything that got in the way got hot metal in it. Now, round here, you'll see the living accommodation. Watch your head, it's very low. There's wood there, because it's still being used today. 26 men, it's very dark in here, 26 men would have slept in here. Their own stove, their own well, absolutely everything. Totally self-sufficient. Not somewhere I'd like to stay, I can tell you. There you go. Well, I suppose we ought to go and find Helg. What are you doing?